Hey everyone, welcome to the UkeStuff podcast. Today I am here with two people that I've had the chance to meet once in person. They are very active in the ukulele world, but for me, they have a background in music education and they're from my home state of Wisconsin, which makes me feel particularly connected to them. So with me today are Nicole and Aaron Keim. And Nicole and Aaron, would you like to introduce yourselves and kind of what you do today?
Yeah, we live in Hood River, Oregon, and we build musical instruments under the name Beansprout. That's where we're mainly busy right now. And then also we play folk music together, and we teach music in person at camps and festivals. And we also write instructional books and make the YouTube videos that go with them. And then we play in local musical groups, and then Nicole teaches locally as well. And then we make all kinds of folk art and hang out with our 9-year-old son.
And how often does your group perform, like in terms of performances? I know you have some CDs that are available and recordings. Are those available like Apple Music and so forth too, in all those places?
Yeah, the name of our group together is called The Quiet American, and we have 4 or 5 CDs, and it's all over all the stuff, and you can buy them off our websites, of course. Since COVID, that really stopped our traveling, and so we have hardly ever played music together since then. And what's been interesting is since COVID, with Zoom and traveling and a lot less, we basically play 3 songs together, and that's all you do at a Uke Fest, right? Like we show up. So we hardly play music together anymore, really, compared to years past. Um, and but that's okay. It's just a shift in what we do.
Doesn't mean that will be that way forever. It
No,
just
yeah,
things kind of flip flopped with COVID, where before travel was our thing that we did from what March through November, at least once a month, traveled to different places, and then COVID hit, and then Aaron's instrument building really
took over.
took
Yeah,
over, and so we're just kind of feeling out how to get back into
yeah,
the performing together. We do one event every year in outside of Portland. That's a ukulele camp called Manuka Ukulele Band Camp, and so we perform at that every year. And we're gradually adding more things back into
yeah.
our schedule.
I mean, part of it too is just a logistics thing. Is like when we are home here in Oregon and we want to play locally, if Nicole and I want to go and play a concert, we have to then hire a babysitter or bring Henry along or something, right? And it just got easier over the years where Nicole has a band she plays in and I have a band I play in. And so, like, she's got a rehearsal, I stay home. I've got a gig, she stays home. And it's just been easier to like run our family that way a little bit. But before, up till COVID, till Henry was 5 or 6, I mean, Henry just came along and we just crossed our fingers for childcare all the time. And that was great. But now he's school age and, we'd rather just stay home so we can have normal public school training for him.
Now, you guys, you met in college
Mhm.
at UW Whitewater, one of the UW system schools, University of Wisconsin. You're both Wisconsin natives. What was school music like for you growing up, both of you? Like, what were your experiences with school music?
We had excellent music education programs in Wisconsin. I feel like we were very lucky. I was involved, my sister and I were both involved in band and choir, elementary school, middle school, high school, great training. And the reason that I wanted to become a music educator was really in high school. My choral teacher just really inspired me. And she gave me a lot of leadership opportunities, section leaders, and leading rehearsals and conducting lessons and things that made me want to go to school for music. And she actually was an alumni of UW Whitewater. So that was one of the two places that I auditioned and then ended up attending. So I feel like um,
But you had private lessons
oh,
too, right?
yeah, took private piano lessons and private voice lessons, middle school through high school, college. And I feel like our education, at least for me, in high school is very comprehensive. I feel like our band and choral teachers they attended music conference. They were always bringing in new ideas. We had portfolios. I feel like they just were just on it, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, and I grew up in Janesville, and I did chorus and band all the way through, and I did all the like marching band, jazz band, all the extra stuff. And we both, oh, I did musical theater, and Nicole did too. They had theater programs at her school. Did all the musical theater stuff, sang in the choir, took all the classes, you know, did all the band and choir stuff we could, right? And just did everything. And yeah, I think we didn't know it at the time, but like in the 90s in Wisconsin, I think we had a bit of a golden age for music education and education in general. Like we saw our teachers as people that we wanted to be like, and we saw what their career path as like a solid way to make a living. And that's why all of us went to college, is because we saw how what those people's careers were like, you know, not knowing how much public education was going to change over when we got out of school. But yeah, and we just had great music teachers who gave us lots of opportunity, and we just did everything we could.
So, what instruments did you play like in band in high school, both of you?
I grew up playing the clarinet.
Yeah, and I started on clarinet, and then I switched to the French horn. So when I went to college to be a band teacher, horn was my main instrument.
Now, I'm going to ask you some other questions. Did you play recorder in elementary school?
Hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
Did you play Orff instruments when you were
No,
growing up?
No,
that was
neither.
not a thing yet in Wisconsin. People didn't really do Orff, but
Well, maybe it was a thing, but not in
yeah.
the
Not
schools that
school.
we went to. Yeah,
It
because
depends on the school. I'm trying to think of some of those other elementary, but where I'm getting to is, was there any sign of an ukulele in your elementary or high school or middle school experience?
Not
no.
a chance. Nope. When we found it in college, people thought it was even weird in the late 90s, early 2000s. Still, like, you know, it was just the beginning of that stuff. But
Yeah.
we had recorder and everything. And when I was in college, I actually played in an early music ensemble. So I had a couple of nerdy recorder years actually where I really liked playing recorder. That was pretty cool.
After college, when I got my first teaching job, or my second teaching job, I was blessed to have a huge classroom with lots of parent support and huge budget, which was, kind of unheard of. And so I decided to get a classroom set of ukuleles, and I was really excited. And we went back. This is when we were living in Colorado. We went back to Wisconsin for a wedding of our two friends, and the woman who did my practicum when I was in college, very well known music educator in Wisconsin. I was telling her at the reception, I was like, "Oh, I'm so excited that we're getting ukuleles," and she was like, "You need to be getting guitars. Ukulele, no one has an ukulele." Like, this was back in what,
2000.
2005.
Yeah.
She's like, guitars is what people are going to relate to. And I just kind of was taken. I was like, oh, okay. Well, I was really excited about it. And I got ukuleles anyways. So that was just kind of interesting that it was
She's
not on the radar.
like a whole generation earlier, right? Like she
Yeah.
just hadn't been exposed to it. I remember right about that same time, James Hill was a guest on a music education in Canada radio program, like a national program, and it was like a live debate argument between James and a woman of an older generation about recorder versus ukulele. It was super cringy because like James is like, oh yeah, everybody should play uke because like you can sing and play and we can all learn chords and then we can all learn the pop music the kids like, but we can play classical music, we can do everything. And when you play the recorder, all you can do is just play the tune. It's better to be able to play the tune and play chords and sing, you know? And the woman's like, yes, but can you do this? And then she played My Heart Will Go On the recorder. And that was like her argument was like, My Heart Will Go On the recorder is infinitely better than all the things James can think of. And I was like, I don't know, man. I think James is right.
I wonder if he's got that anywhere, like on recording, because that'd be amazing to listen to.
It will not age well. You know what I mean? Like,
Now, you said you actually found ukulele in college. Did you really find it in college?
well, I got our first one in college, like a toy from somewhere. I got like a toy from somewhere, and I wanted to make it work, and it wasn't going to work. But that's when I in college is when I saw Little Rev play for the first time. So I played, string bass in this string band, and we played bluegrass and old time music and folk. And so those guys knew about Little Rev. So we like drove to Milwaukee to watch Little Rev play, and he played an ukulele at that concert. And I was like, oh, this thing is cool. I want to get one. And so he's the first time I ever heard one live, ever. This is like 2001, maybe. And so I got one then, but it was just trash. Like, it wasn't ever going to work. But I really wanted to learn it, and then it didn't really kick in as a real thing till we went to graduate school in Colorado, and then
You went to graduate school.
we moved to Colorado. And I went to graduate school, yeah, and I found one in Colorado, and that's when I really got into it. But
What was your graduate program in?
I did my master's in musicology, music history, and I studied uh, American string band music from the Great Depression. And like both my projects actually ended up bumping up against Hawaiian music as well, because I did my one project about the spread of the Hawaiian or steel guitar during the Great Depression via mail order course. So people would send away for like music sheet instruction through the mail, and you'd do these instructional programs that came in the mail to learn the Hawaiian guitar. And it was during like one of these phases of Hawaiian music popularity. And so, one of the ways that the Hawaiian guitar made its way into all the other kinds of American music, like the dobro and bluegrass, or the pedal steel guitar and country music, or those things, it made it there because little kids wanted to play Hawaiian music, but then they ended up playing their own music in their local area, right? So anyway, while I was doing my master's degree and I was learning to play the ukulele, some of my research into historical music rubbed up against Hawaiian music at that time, which I didn't plan for. It just kind of happened.
So then, Nicole, you're teaching actively. Aaron, you're going into higher education with a goal to become what, do you think, at that point?
Oh, I guess at that time I thought I was going to be a college professor, right? Like, I thought, well, teaching band is cool, but I want to be an academic. And so I went to school for the master's degree. Nicole was teaching full time while I was in the master's degree. But then when I started my master's degree, I also joined the band. And so, like, over time, it felt like I didn't want to do 6 more years to get a PhD to try to get an academic job, because I was playing music and having more fun playing music. And then it kind of turned out that, like, the music that I was studying was a vernacular music. And so it was like, oh, well, I don't need to be in an academic classroom reading books about this. Like, I need to go to the Bluegrass Festival and just go play music. So I kind of gave up on traditional academic life at that time, because I just didn't want to pay for 6 more years of a PhD program or something. And kind of found that, like, I was learning what I wanted to learn just by being in a band. But everything we've done since then, my research mind and my academic mind and my training, it guides all the things we do, and it's now coming out even in our woodworking, because of the way I approach history and tools and methods and wood and tradition and cultural history and whatever. It's inside what we do.
So you at this point are playing bass. Did both of you play guitar prior to that too at all?
I had to take guitar lessons in college, and that was kind of where that ended for me. I guess I did play a little bit of
School.
guitar at school to accompany kids and things.
And
But I soon after Aaron really got going with his band, and I acquired an ukulele that for my classroom, and I just found that so much easier to play for me. I have smaller hands, so it just worked better for me in the classroom to teach with, and tinier and can move around the classroom better.
Yeah. And I didn't play guitar before bass. Bass was my first one. But then in graduate school, also, I started to play all the different folk instruments. And there's a lot of years where I played guitar, and I traveled with, in my band, I played guitar a lot. But I always kind of played a lot of instruments, and everybody plays guitar. So I kind of just, even though I did a lot of it and could do it, it just kind of didn't pay off compared to playing the other things. Because, like, showing up with a string bass or a banjo or a steel guitar when there's already 8 guitar players, it's kind of better to do something else. We do technically still own a 6 string guitar, but none of us play it, like, really.
Henry will have to pick up that later, right? In
Oh,
terms of
actually,
he is. Yeah.
time we can.
Yeah, Henry's playing electric guitar now. He was really into it, and so we built him. He and I built one this Christmas, and it was really fun. So that's what Henry's interested in is loud and fast music. So I actually had to go into my son's room and ask him to turn his amp down. It's a milestone, right?
So when did the building start of ukuleles? Was that in Colorado, or did you have
Yeah.
another step before that?
When I was in Colorado, the band I was in got hired to go play at the Nova Scotia Ukulele Ceilidh in 2005 in Nova Scotia. And so at that festival, three things happened that made my whole career happen. The first is that I met Marianne Brogan, and Marianne lives in Portland, and she has run music events in the Pacific Northwest for 15 years now. And so Marianne, as a person who always hired me, and then as a collaborator and as a patron as well of our artistic life, meeting her and starting that relationship was important, because that was one of the reasons I moved to the Northwest, is I knew we had work in the Northwest. Number one. Number two, I met James Hill at that event. James was 17 years old, and James was really interested in folk music too. So we met each other and started to play and hang out then. So I met James at that event. And third is I met two people who also lived in Colorado, but I didn't know them yet. And that was Heidi and Rob Litke. And Heidi and Rob, when we got back to Colorado, I had expressed my interest in wanting to learn how to build musical instruments. And Heidi and Rob were like serial entrepreneurs. And they were like, oh yeah, we should start building banjo ukes. How about we run the business and you learn how to build banjo ukes and we'll make a thing. And like that's how it started for me, is to have those people like signed on to like run the business and know how to do those things. So that's when we started the company Beansprout. So Beansprout at first was me and Heidi and Rob, and we only built banjo ukes at first. And I wanted to do that because I wanted to play one. And at the time, there was no new manufacturing of banjo ukes at all in the whole world. You could go buy an old one and fix it up, but you couldn't buy a new or handmade banjo uke in America.
He built these banjo ukes in the basement of our town home, which didn't have a dust collecting system.
Right.
What are the main tools that you had when you started building?
Not enough.
You had some sort of saw.
I had a bandsaw and I had a belt sander and a drill. And my dust collector was a shop vac, which is a dumb idea, but I didn't know it at the time. Yeah.
Our washer and dryer were downstairs, and once he started building, I said, okay, I'm not doing laundry down here anymore. It's too dusty. So you're in charge of laundry from now on.
Yep.
Now, Nicole, when he starts building and starts considering that, as a career, what do you think as a music educator? I mean, are you all for it? Or are you like, what were you like?
We've actually never unpacked that. Yeah. What did you think about this?
I mean, maybe in therapy we've been,
yeah.
No, just kidding. That time in our lives was just we were just kind of finding ourselves as people and adults and musicians. We, within the span of 2 months, we graduated college, got married, and moved across the country from Wisconsin to Colorado. So I think I kind of just felt like I've got my thing. I'm teaching elementary music. Aaron's doing grad school. He's doing his band. Then he tells me he wants to build musical instruments. We were also teaching private lessons at that time.
All the time then.
And I just kind of felt like, okay, whatever it takes to make all of this work, financially, and for both of us to be happy. I wanted him to feel fulfilled. And so, yeah, I think do you remember it differently? There may have been some fear, I think, just kind of changing career paths.
I mean, I think when I started building, it didn't seem like it was going to be a lucrative career. I still thought I was still going to play music all the time, right? Like, I didn't know that it would be a thing that we would eventually lean on.
Right.
Yeah. So, like, it was at that time when I was doing Beansprout, it was like 20% of my life or something, right? Or 30% of my life. And music and teaching was the rest. So it just kind of, so I don't know. But I think also, relationships have patterns, and some of those patterns are well worn for good reason, and some are well worn for bad reason. And maybe you don't know that they're good or bad till later. But one of our patterns is I'm like, oh, you know what we ought to do? And Nicole's like, what? And I'm like, I think we ought to whatever. And she's like, what? And I was like, yeah, I was reading all about it. And then I just am like, have stayed up all night reading about a thing. And I'm like, we ought to do this. And Nicole's like, okay, what are we going to do? And I'm like, so what we got to do is we got to blah, blah, blah.
He's got this grand plan in his head already that's already been dreamed of and drawn up and drafted. And he kind of, I remember the conversation. We were kicking a soccer ball outside, and you were like, I'm going to build banjo ukes. And I was just like,
Yeah.
okay, how? And so that's, yeah, that is kind of a thing that is cyclical in
Yeah.
our lives, where I'm immediately kind of frozen into, what is this going to look like? How are we going to do it? What's it going to cost? All the things.
Mm.
And he has more of a broad perspective and faith that, like, I'm going to do this and it's going to work out, and this is how it's going to happen. And
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, we both are people who write lists and have clipboards, but like, and so sometimes though, like when I tell her my idea, I'm already 3 sheets deep on the clipboard and she doesn't know it yet,
oh
right?
yeah,
So it's not like
you're
it's
not just a dreamer, like
right,
you're
like it's
very
yeah.
organized in what
But
your
I think
thoughts.
also we've come to realize over the last few years that like Nicole has a different set of detailed mind than my detail mind, and so come to this place where like she kind of is my editor for the world. So she quality checks the instruments. She rewrites all my tablature. She checks all the emails that get sent out to make sure my writing is right. She edits my articles before they get published. You look
Edit
up,
the books that
edit the
we write.
books. Yeah, she's the one who quality checks and ships all the instruments. I mean, like, so like everything I do flows through Nicole's world on the way out. Um, and for better or for worse, that's worked pretty
Yeah.
well, so I think building instruments was just another one of those things where I was like, we're gonna do this, and you're like, okay, and then we did it. And I mean, that's a really short way to make a long story, right? I mean, because lots of things have happened since then. But
Yeah.
Now, did you have any prior woodworking experience before that happened? You're a
not
music
really.
teacher. You weren't taking shop class.
No,
You
I
you
never
know,
took a
you
shop class.
yeah.
Um, and my dad didn't have a shop, but I grew up in a farming family, so like I knew what a shop was, but to me a shop is like where you work on the tractors and you sharpen the lawnmower blades and you might have to cut some wood for a thing, like a farm duty shop is what I grew up with, not fine woodworking. I never took a shop class, but then I spent my whole youth in Boy Scouts and I was a camp counselor and I did ton of wood stuff in Boy Scouts, but more importantly, Boy Scouts just gave me, in working at a summer camp, just gave me that like natural handiness and confidence of like, oh, you want to make what? I don't know, let's make that. And like we just made stuff. Like I didn't own a chisel or a hand plane or a handsaw or a sander. Like I just knew like I was not ready and didn't know it. Like by a long shot. Um and I just picked up the education kind of like along the way. And also this is kind of like pre-YouTube and pre-DIY woodworking education. I mean, like the alternative was this. I just paid for graduate school. And Heidi was like, "Oh, you should go to the Red Rocks Community College because you can do a 2-year guitar building program," which actually would have made the most sense. But Nicole and I were like, "I'm not paying for a 2-year woodworking program. I just finished a 3-year master's degree. Like we are done with school money, right?" you know, in hindsight, I should have done what Heidi did and
Yeah.
gone and studied with Robbie O'Brien at the community college, and it would have changed our career path for sure.
All right, so you're building some ukuleles at home, but they're banjo ukuleles.
Mm.
Before I ask the next question, is there a reason why banjo ukuleles never developed metal strings?
Oh, I mean, I see them on old ones from time to time, and I think it's because people just put metal ones on there. But I think if you think about it, when it comes to a banjo uke, its identity is actually more uke than banjo because it's designed for a uke player to pick up and use. So it makes sense to just have the uke strings there because it's what they're used to with their hands. But also with the short scale in the steel strings, it really accentuates all the high overtones, while the non-steel strings, the uke strings, mellow it all out a little bit. So like a banjo uke with uke strings on it is already like a weapon of mass destruction. Like it can be the loudest thing in a county. So putting steel strings on it just doesn't help. Like I think we spend most of our times trying to tune or to like tame the banjo uke and make it polite, not louder. So I think that's probably why it uses the uke strings instead of the metal ones.
Is something I've always wondered, and I thought you might have an idea, which that makes total sense. So, okay, so you're building ukuleles at home, and banjo ukuleles in particular. You're selling a few. By the way, do you still have any of your early works around?
Um, I don't have any of the original 100 that I built in Colorado. Um, they're all long gone, but I see them from time to time. Customers still play them and have them, and every once in a while somebody buys one secondhand and sends it back to me for a checkup. Um, so they're out there, I think, but I don't have them. I'm kind of always been the kind of person who tends to sell the old things and move on to the next model. I don't really keep a lot of old things around museum style. And part of that has just been because we're kind of working class musician type people. Like, we can't afford to keep all the things I make when other people are perfectly happy to buy them. So I don't really have any pieces from the original Beansprout era.
I think there's been a few regrets over the years of things that you've sold, and I don't know if that's specifically
Yeah.
things that you've built or just instruments that every once in a while you're like, oh man, I wish I still had
Yeah.
blah blah blah.
Yeah. I've let a few get away for sure. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I just think that for us too, like, instruments are really important, but instruments are tools to do our musical jobs. And so I kind of only keep the ones around that we're using to make a living with or we really need, and kind of don't keep the rest around. So um
He's been known to sell off his own personal instrument at a festival.
all the
He'll
time.
come home and
Yeah.
be like, "Well, I guess I have to make myself a new baritone because I just sold mine." So,
Yeah.
yeah.
When you see the early work, do you look at it with awe of what you were able to do, or do you see things that you would have done differently and look at it that way? How do you look at your old work when it comes in?
Once in a while I look at a thing and I'm like, oh, you did it. That works. That's good. Like, oh yeah, that worked out. But mostly I look at it and it looks clumsy to me. Just like the way the curves are, or the finish, or the fretwork, or just all of it. It's like, I mean, it all was good. People seem to be happy with them. It all worked out. I have a career, but definitely in that first 100, I think it's just kind of clumsy.
So you're making these instruments. When do you run into Gordon and Char and start that part of the journey, which seems like it's that next major part?
Yeah. Well, while I was building those and grad school was finishing up, I was traveling with my band a lot. And when we came to the Northwest, we met Gordon and Char at, actually, we met them first at Denver Uke Fest. And then we just started to see them at other uke events that we worked at. And so we became friends with them. And then they were the kind of people that invite musicians to stay at their house when you're near them. And they helped us get gigs. And so we got to this point where my band is, when we went to the Northwest to play tours, we would stay at their house whenever we could, because it was a free place to stay and it was really nice and they were generous. And it was a good like base of operations for going to do stuff. So while we would do that, the rest of the band would be sleeping, and I would go out to the shop with Gordon and Char, and I wanted to learn more about building ukuleles. And Gordon and Char are the people who started Mya-Moe Ukuleles. So over a few years, we saw them at festivals, and I would visit them in their shop, and then we kind of started to collaborate when I visited them in their shop. And then over time, they decided that they wanted me, I was going to still build banjo ukes, but they wanted me to build ukuleles for them and with them. So we had like a series of instruments that I built in Colorado, but with the parts that I made in Washington. And I would pack up a whole big suitcase of ukulele parts that I milled, take them back to Colorado, and I would build them in Colorado, and then they would get shipped to Mya-Moe customers. So that went on, I think that was about a year. You probably don't remember.
I don't know.
I think about a year. It was like a long distance collaboration, and that was fun. I learned a ton over that time, but obviously it's not the ideal way to work together in a woodworking business. Um, and we were getting to the point then too where I wasn't sure that band in Colorado was going to go much longer, and Nicole was thinking about taking a break from teaching, and we were thinking about having a baby. All those
Yeah.
things were like all at the same time, and so again, actually, it's just kind of like when we moved the first time, like all at the same time. Nicole quit her teaching job. I canceled my band. Um, I bought
Well, your
Beansprout.
band was kind of falling apart.
Well, yeah, but I could have kept it going if we stayed in Colorado. I
Right.
chose not
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
I bought Beansprout from Heidi and Rob. I signed on with Gordon and Char, and we moved to Oregon. Like all.
And I started making
Oh, then you switched to
felt
art. Yeah.
hair clips and headbands for my for my full-time job when we moved here. So when I was teaching in Colorado, I did craft shows and things on the weekends, and just really felt like oh, this is really fun. I enjoy making things. And I was getting kind of burnt out of teaching. I taught for 9 years, and I bow down to you for teaching as long as you have, because um I had the ideal classroom. I had parent support. Um, Things got a little interesting with administration changes and stuff. So that, as you know, that's just the way it goes. But yeah, I was just feeling a call towards, I don't know that I can do this for 20 more years. And was had just kind of felt that way for maybe a year or two. I think it was after I think it was after grad school. I went to grad school while I was teaching. I did a summer program at Northwestern. And I think even though I was inspired by grad school, it just tired me out because
Yeah.
I didn't get summer breaks for 4 years. So, yeah, I was just kind of feeling like I was on my way to maybe taking a break. And then Gordon and Char said, it really doesn't make sense for you to be living in Colorado and building for us. So why don't,
Well, actually, a little bit backwards.
oh, I do.
I got to the breaking point of like, this is too hard to do here. And I made up a plan on a clipboard and I called Gordon. I said, Gordon, this is the plan. We should do this. And he goes, it's about time you figured it out. So
Oh,
he knew that we needed to move and live there. And, but he was like waiting for us to decide to do it.
yeah. I
So,
think there had been some conversation back and forth
yeah.
with them,
Yeah. I mean,
the
it
years
wasn't,
prior.
yeah.
Just like, oh, when are you going to move out here? Kind of.
Yeah.
So we just decided to, yeah, take the leap and have Aaron come out and work full time for them. And then I took a break from teaching. Uh, and
But that's also then when you and I started to play music together all the time and travel to the
yes,
UkeFest circuit. So
yeah,
I worked for Gordon 4 days a week, but we were still hitting music and writing books and traveling pretty hard. Like
yeah,
we played a lot of UkeFests over those Mya-Moe years.
right.
Um,
Yeah.
So Nicole, you were getting your master. Did you get your master's at Northwestern? Are we talking Northwestern Evanston,
Yeah.
Illinois? Okay.
Yeah.
So what was your master's in?
Music education.
Okay.
Yeah, they have an excellent program for teachers where it's a 6 week intensive. So basically, I finished teaching. I had a week to pack up my car and drive the 18 hours to Illinois and get unpacked. And then it was a 6 week program. And then I had a week to get back before meetings started for school. And it's a four-year program. And then, of course, during the year we would work on projects and things that examples of things that we could take back for the following summer. Yeah.
So now you find yourself in Oregon with, and you've sort of put Beansprout on the back burner for a little while, and then
yeah,
you're
what
building.
eventually what happened is um, Beansprout became a model at Mya-Moe. So
Okay.
I continued to make banjo ukes at Mya-Moe while I made the regular ukes too, but they were Mya-Moe banjo ukes. And so there's like 150 or 200 or so banjo ukes out there with the Mya-Moe headstock, and they're from those years there. But then my building, everything was for Gordon and Char. Like I didn't have my own building. Everything I made was for them. That was part of the deal. And so for those years at Mya-Moe, Beansprout as a business was technically not running, but the Gordon was smart enough to let me keep the name going as a model so that the name was still in people's brains, so that when I went back out on my own, it still existed, which was really cool of him to let us do that.
I'm still so amazed that that whole thing worked out from the outside perspective. And I mean, I get into ukuleles in 2016
Mhm.
because, long story short, as I'm teaching middle school music at the time, they ended up changing our contract so that we only did 2 concerts a year. So one would be in the December or January part of the year, and then the other would be in May. So you had this big gap in the middle of the year. So I tried a bunch of things, and then around 2015, there were a whole bunch of articles in all the music ed magazines, the former MENC, which is now NAFME, talking about ukulele. So I approached my administration, said, "Can I start with ukuleles?" They said, "Sure, but we won't pay for it."
Mhm.
And then I approached the district. I live in a pretty large district. The district said, "We think it's a great idea, but we won't pay for it." So I fundraised and bought a set of ukuleles. So I was, teaching ukulele for the first time. It had always been a folk instrument growing up. So the two people that I would say that I would know ukulele from are really both Tiny Tim from my era, being 50 years old, and then also Don Ho on the Brady Bunch
Uh-huh.
Yep.
playing ukulele with the Brady Bunch. I mean, those I saw it as both a shtick and both as a folk instrument. I never saw it as anything else. And I can still remember around 2009, where I'm teaching high school, and I'm walking down the music area, and there's kids playing a ukulele in the general area around the music area, and I'm thinking, kids playing the ukulele, what's going on with this? But years later, I end up in 2016 teaching it because I thought, well, let's try this, because I tried a bunch of other things that didn't work, and the kids loved it. There were some failures, there were some wins there before I moved it, but you're already doing all this stuff with ukulele, and it just, from the outside at that point, learning about Mya-Moe, as you're starting to learn about ukulele with no idea what's going on, finding out that this is this really revered brand. Like, people are like, if you have a Mya-Moe, it is considered better than anything. Quite honestly, that was the thought, at the time. So, and then learning from the outside that, you just weren't always part of Mya-Moe from the start, but kind of melded in.
Yeah.
And the fact that that worked, and again, I don't want you to talk about any conflict or anything. I don't want you to talk about
Yeah.
that or whatever. But it was amazing to look at from the outside. How does that work? And then when they were ready to pull apart, and they were ready to retire, and then decided to sell Mya-Moe, and you went on your own, to watch actually from the outside how smooth that seemed to be too was amazing.
Mhm.
I don't know if it felt that smooth on the inside, but on the outside, that whole process was like, how does that happen?
Well, a bunch of good stuff was built into this. And the first thing was Gordon and Char have spent their whole lives running businesses, and they were very successful outside of woodworking. So for them, business stuff is just like what they know. And they, right when I started to work to them, they were like, well, what do you want to do long term? And I was like, well, I probably want to keep Beansprout going long term. And they're like, okay, well, we'll just make sure we can build that in if you ever want to do that. Cool. And they're like, and we'll also build in that if you ever want to take over Mya-Moe, we can do that too. So they just like, we just kind of like had that all available. And their knowledge of how to run businesses and how to start them and end them and all those things is really great. But more importantly, their generosity of like choosing to mentor us and set us up for future success. They made a choice to do that. So even when they knew they were going to sell Mya-Moe to somebody else, there still was like an 18-month plan about how to reset up Beansprout and get that going and make sure that I had the tools and wood and machines that were mine or should be mine from that situation earmarked out ahead of, so we knew years in advance like what was going to happen and how it was going to go. And they're just like super generosity, they chose to take care of us.
Yeah.
you
I
know
think it was right after or shortly after our son Henry was born in 2014
yep, that's right.
that they came to us and said, okay, we want to be done doing this in
2018.
Oh, I thought it was
Well,
17.
nope,
Okay,
it's
2018.
Yep.
So, on one hand, I was like, we had just had a baby, but uh, we also knew that they would. This was not just a thing where we're like, okay, we're out of here. Figure it out for yourself. Like, we knew that they had our best interest in mind, and that's why they were telling us. And so we had that amount of time in between to kind of figure out what we were going to do. And Aaron decided, he would want to maybe just do his own thing. And so we were renting at the time and didn't have a shop or anything. So we knew we had to buy a house with a shop that we could turn into what Aaron needed it to be. So that took some time.
Yeah.
And so we were appreciative that they gave us the notice with plenty of time for us to kind of tool up and revamp our lives and figure out how this was all going to work.
Yeah. They're just really smart and really generous. I mean, that's why it worked out.
Yeah.
And I remember watching, Gordon was making a series on YouTube at the time, and he
Yeah.
was talking about the whole basic dismantling or selling of the company, like on a weekly basis. It was really fascinating to watch from the outside.
Hmm.
And maybe that's just because I have this weird interest in the subject, but nonetheless, it was just really very transparent.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
transparent.
The lessons that I learned from them are sometimes so deeply ingrained I don't even know it's a thing I learned. Like I still have like internalized tons of stuff from that era of my building and of running businesses. And it has been a great starting point for us to develop our own values and our own ideas, because we started from a place of success, that we knew what we wanted to keep from that, but what we wanted to do to make our own thing possible. Um, and you know, if I would have started with a company that was, you know, leaking at the seams, you know, it would have been harder to find success.
Yeah.
So
We still find ourselves sometimes when a situation arises, we say, okay, well, what would Gordon and Char do? You know, and it's like really comforting to draw from all the experience that Aaron had with them, and you know, I got to know them as well, of course.
Yeah.
So yeah,
We could make a bumper sticker with that. What would Gordon?
yeah,
yeah,
But with all sincerity, part of the reason why I think it probably also works so well is you guys project this sense that you're good people, right? Nobody's perfect, but I don't think that's an act. I think that's true, and I think Gordon and Char projected that they were good people. I don't think that was an act. There are people, so good people helping good people just ends up being generally a good situation.
yeah.
Even though I'm sure there are tough times too. I mean, there always are, right? In every relationship. So
yeah.
yeah. So when does the publishing part of your effort begin?
The first book we wrote, we wrote the little ones when we lived in Colorado, but you didn't work on them.
I think I helped type them out at our typewriter or something.
I did typewriter. And
Okay.
You didn't. Yeah.
Okay,
So we had 3 little books before we moved, but then when we moved to Oregon in 2011,
2012.
2012,
Yeah.
2012 was when we wrote Clawhammer Ukulele. That was the first big book that we wrote. Oh, look at her. She's got it right here.
There we go.
Yeah. That was 2012. And that was a technique I'd been teaching at festivals forever. And I had actually gotten on and made YouTube videos starting like right when YouTube started, which is actually a thing that like really launched our careers long term, is that I started YouTube super early. Now I can't get any traction on YouTube because the world has changed. But back in the day, I had viral ukulele videos.
If you go find the videos, it's really
They're
awesome.
like
They're
unwatchable.
so grainy,
Like,
and
yeah, it's,
yeah.
it's unwatchable. It's like literally
It still has a bunch of views, and people still watch them.
people still watch it.
learn
Yeah,
from them.
yeah.
Well,
Anyway,
the content's still good. So,
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
you know,
So 2012, we wrote that book and we made YouTube videos to go with it.
Well, I think that what the impetus for me getting involved in that is we went to Australia in, I believe it was 2012, and Aaron was hired to teach, and then I just came along to perform with him. And I was sitting in on his workshop, and he handed out the handouts that he had made, and I looked at them. And I was like, yeah, I should have done this for him. I've always liked art and drawing and writing. So I think that was the last time Aaron ever made his own handouts again. And so I had kind of done that for a while. And then when he said he wanted to make a book, I was like, oh, that's fun. I can write it and illustrate it and use my talents and put them together.
Yeah. And it was good because like I had the content and the energy to get started. And Nicole's hand is just the way she writes is beautiful. She writes in fonts and the little illustrations and the tab written out by hand. I mean, it's not a computer generated book. So there are people who buy our books just as folk art who don't even play the music. They just buy them because they like how they look. And that's because of Nicole. Like, you know, and then of course, ever since she's been rewriting all my handouts so that they look good. And that's part of our brand, right?
Yeah.
Is having this like handwritten old timey thing in front of you is it's just part of what we do, and it's a part it goes along with all the other things that we do with the old music and the woodworking and the folk art, and you know, it just makes sense. It's like a handmade thing in a digital age, you know.
and let me reiterate, they are beautifully created. I mean, and the other thing is, if you think that that means it has to be in paper, it doesn't, because you can also buy the PDFs on their website, which when I edit this video, I'll make sure that the Quiet American website appears below where people know that they can buy those.
Thanks.
So they're gorgeous. I mean, and people, so people can understand, you're actually handwriting music notes, not
Yeah.
just, you know, print. like the whole thing is hand drawn and a work of art. I mean, that's
Thank you.
legit.
Thank you.
And
Yeah.
every page that she works on, she has to like design the whole page. So sometimes she'll get like 90% done with it and be like, oh, there's no room for this last thing. And so she just goes like this and throws it away.
Start over.
And she starts at the top and just lays it all out again. There's no like cutting and pasting and moving. She just does it. So that's why there can be some friction when I go to edit it for the fourth time and she goes to edit it for the fifth time and I find a mistake and then she has to do the whole page over again. But you know, we want it to be good. We want it to be right. And so
the process has definitely evolved. I remember the Clawhammer book we wrote. I did it while we were on summer vacation with Aaron's family, and I just had a legal pad behind a white sheet of paper, and that's how I would try to like see the lines and write straight and all that kind of stuff. And I did for the staff paper. I did like cut and paste down with tape onto the paper. Now I have a light box that has a template that I made that has line sheets, and I use a computer program to come up with at least the lines of the tab, so that I lay that all out on the computer, print out the sheet, and then I handwrite the musical notes and the words and everything else. So it's evolved a little bit, but I also think something that's unique as far as music education, our background, is that we bring that to our books as well. So we're not just writing down music; we're using the influences that we've had in how to teach something, how to be comprehensive, how to.
It's all MENC stuff, like the pacing of the books, the spiral curriculum to it, the using repertoire to teach a technique. Like it's all like we're still. Dr. Barrett would be proud of us. You know, it's like we're just doing it like we learned, and just using repertoire instead of just exercises. You know, I mean, that's all in there. We don't even really think about it. You know, we just kind of pace the books that way, and it's worked pretty well for us. So we kind of have a miniature publishing empire, if you could call it that. And when we were touring more, we sold a lot more books. But it's like we don't tour as much, but we just sell books and PDFs every day, and they go out and people work on the music and they watch the YouTube videos and we get little emails about them, and it's a good little part of our business. How many books have we done now?
I think 8 or 10 of the
10.
full size.
Yeah, 8 or 10 books. That's probably right.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of YouTube resources too for many of those things.
Yes.
Pretty much every page in every book has 1 or 2 YouTube videos that go with them.
I did want to ask a process question for players, because you kind of go through the sequence and most people learn how to play chords and they get relatively decent with chords and strumming, and some people are happy to just stop there, as you well know, going to conferences and things like that and conventions. But I've often tried to decipher what's the next step for people, and I usually say probably chord melody is a good place for that next step, because it gets you playing some tablature while you're still kind of with chords. But what do you think happens after that? Or do you just get to like sort of pick and choose? Do you think, I mean, do you see like claw, hammer, and fingerstyle as kind of being the same thing, or full tab playing or full out, solo playing as being 3 different things? Or do they all relate? How do you look at it for that next step?
My answer is an unconventional answer, and I don't think you'll get this from anybody else. I think after someone's got the basics down and they love playing their instrument, the ultimate goal is to integrate them into a musical culture. And so the answer is going to be different for everybody. But I want that person who's now got an instrument and knows their basic chords to go out and find what they want and love and what works for their local area and their situation, and dive into that. So if that's playing jazz standards at old folks' homes, if it's playing second row at a bluegrass jam session, if it's playing Hawaiian music, if it's playing pop music off YouTube, if it's playing in a folk band, like I don't care necessarily. I just want them to be integrated, because I think the ukulele strum circle as an ultimate goal can be a debilitating and limiting musical experience. If all you ever do is have a binder of songs and the chords and lyrics, and you sit in a circle with the same 20 people and sing the same things every week, that can be great for a bunch of people.
And some people are perfectly happy,
and they're
like you
fine with
said,
that.
with
Yeah,
that.
yeah. But that can be a trap because you're not going out to live a musical life, right? So unfortunately, that's an answer that doesn't give a one single path because it depends on somebody's path, right? Like, do they want to play blues? Do they want to play at church? You know, like it's going to have their own thing. Um, so that's, I don't know, that's my 2 cents on that. I mean,
Yeah.
you teach more beginners than I do. So
Well,
what do you think?
speaking from my own personal experience, like I still mostly a lot of the times just play chords.
Yeah.
But I've tried to kind of branch out because I don't want to just do that. So for me, it would be more of like I went to a workshop in when we were teaching in Vancouver, Canada, and I saw our friend Daphne teach how to read tablature, and I was like, oh my gosh, this makes sense to me. This is amazing, you know? And so with my ukulele class that I teach for adults, we start with chords, but then we just kind of move into just reading tablature and reading melodies um, on tablature and doing like learning songs that can be played in rounds and things like that. So for me, I think that comes the tablature and just single note melodies comes first before chord melodies in my mind.
Yeah.
Um,
But
but
that's also a little bit about, you answered my own question my own way, because in Nicole's musical culture, she's playing with two other people who play chords. So when I listen to Nicole sing and play with her friends, what the arrangement needs is somebody to play 8 bars of a melody or a 4 bar lead.
yeah,
And so Nicole's like, well, I guess I got to do it. So she stops chording and she plays the little lead that's supposed to be there. And then she goes back to doing her
yeah,
chords because she's got other people to play the chords while she does that. So Nicole, in her own way, integrated herself into a musical culture, which was, we've got this band with these people who sing these songs, and we sometimes need a little lead thing. It's not a fancy solo. It's not crazy. I hear her working on a little part, eight
just
bars at a
basically
time,
just the melody,
just the melody for 8
yeah,
bars or something.
of her chords,
So that was a that was a musical need that needed to be met,
yeah.
and you met it. You know, so you kind of proved my point in a way by
Well done, sir.
but you might have been in a different musical culture that needed you to do different things.
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah.
But chord melody, you're right. It is the next step if you're playing by yourself on the couch, right? Because you get the chords and the melody. If you're playing with other people, you might not need to play chord melody. So
If you're playing with other people, you should learn how to play the U bass so you can always have a bass player.
Yeah, you bass.
So with all that, where is Beansprout today? How are things going? I think so just so people know what is the cost of an instrument, because it's not inexpensive. I think
Okay.
it's the price is fair. It's what the cost is.
Mm-hmm.
But you want to talk a little bit about all that with where Beansprout is?
So we relaunched Beansprout as our main thing in 2018. And that was just with me and Nicole doing it all by ourselves. And we build ukuleles and banjos.
You build.
Well,
Okay.
build ukuleles and banjos, and I make tenor guitars too. And I do some repair work. We build 5 to 7 things a month, and they're generally custom orders. Some stock instruments that we sell to people online or at festivals and events. And the average instrument is probably $1,800, $1,900, probably average, yeah. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, give or take. So
right now we have about a 6-month waiting list. So we're taking orders for May right now.
Yeah. It's, it is mainly what we do now. Like all the other music stuff and art stuff is secondary to Beansprout, but it's also like kind of integrated into what we do. Like we really are in a world right now where our musical life and our building life and our art life are all wrapped up. So it's kind of an interesting place. But anyway, it's our main source of income. I'm out here in the shop all the time, pretty much. Too much.
It's a blessing and a curse to have your shop be on the same property as your house. Yeah. So yeah, sometimes there have been times where Aaron realizes, okay, my weekends need to just be weekends and I need to do other things other than build. Or, we have to cut off talking about business stuff after a certain time at night and checking emails, business emails.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's like we run our own businesses. We have like a ton of different jobs, and we don't technically have a real job, but we work 100 hours a week, right? Like it's just always doing something.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, we build about 5 to 8 instruments a month. They are generally custom orders that we get, through the website.
You use mostly North American woods.
Yeah, I use almost all North American woods. The only tropical woods I use are ones that I salvage from places. I do a lot of like scavenging, basically. And I mainly just mill and use woods that I either cut the tree myself, or my friend cut the tree, or I know the source, or I scavenge it. So it's really we're really focused on sustainability in forestry. So.
And the inspiration for a lot of the models are based on some classic American designs too, right? With your own twist.
Yeah. So like right there, weird to point. That is a ukulele made in Chicago about 1920. That's made. The company was Lion and Healy, and the brand was Washburn, and so that was a famous ukulele in 1920. And all of my ukulele designs, most of my ukulele designs started with that instrument. So the way the sound hole binding works, the way the fretboard works, the headstock, the shapes, the sizes comes from the Washburn. And oh yeah, there's Nicole's tenor.
I can't do this.
Yeah, and then I tend to start with historic instruments, and then ones that resonate to me through history and culture, and then I make them modern and change them in my own ways and whatever. But like the tenor guitar that's over here, that's based off of a old Regal tenor guitar, and then the banjo ukes and banjos are mainly based off of Lion and Healy instruments from the 1920s that I've changed and altered over time.
Now you also make some like occasional scout ukuleles or other little models that pop up for sale occasionally. Mainly I see them listed on Facebook. Like this one's available, get it if you want for the next whoever gets it first. Those pop up maybe once a month, maybe once every couple of months.
Well, the Scout is inspired by the one above Nicole's head. That's from Lion and Healy. It was called the Camp Uke back in the day, and it was a little tiny one like that. And we couldn't call it a Camp Uke because obviously that was like a trademarked item, so we called it the Scout. But yeah, they're just little ones made from the scraps from building the big ones, and so they're little tiny soprano ones with that little circle body. We have one right there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh well, we have a waiting list. Well, a scout. Yeah, it's called a scout waiting list. But basically, if people are interested in them, they email me. I keep this kind of comprehensive database of who is interested, and then when one is available, we send the email out to the list first, and they have first dibs on whether they want to purchase it or not. And then if everyone passes for whatever reason, then we put it on social media.
Yeah, this is how big they are, little soprano size ones. So this one is myrtle for the body, and Porterford cedar for the top, and Porterford cedar for the neck, and then everything else is oak and walnut. And it's all just little scraps from the wood shop. This one sounds good.
Now, why do you call yours an alto rather than a concert?
So when I was at Mya-Moe, we had like 18 models. It was just like a lot. And then so starting over on our own, it didn't feel like I knew I could not handle keeping all that going. And like 75% of the instruments we built were tenors. So it was like, obviously that one has to be your most important one. And then below that, we made at Mya-Moe, we made a soprano, a super soprano, a 12 fret concert, a 14 fret concert, a pineapple soprano, a pineapple concert, a concert rezzo. So the 7 instruments that were small, even though 70% of the models were tenor, right? So I was like, I can't do 7 small instruments when hardly anybody wants small instruments. So I said, I'm going to design one instrument that is smaller than a tenor that could take the place of all the sopranos and concerts that we made at Mya-Moe. So my alto, the body and the scale length is like between a soprano and a concert, with the idea that it's just like an all-around small instrument. And also, I was smart enough to realize I needed to start a business by having a product that no one else made. And the reason no one else made it is because I just thought it up, right? Like people always comment on social media, alto is not a thing. That's not real. Or like I get that all the time. Like people are mad when I say, oh yeah, we've got this alto. Someone's like, there is no alto. And I'm like, Here it is. Like, and people get angry, which is kind of funny, but yeah, so we needed to start with something special that was smallish, and it actually has become really popular with female musicians, who often have smaller hands, and they want as big a sound as they can get, but they need to play a smaller instrument. And so I think most of our altos go to women.
Huh, never really thought of that.
Oh, like think about like the whole um Portland Jan crew, like
Yeah.
all of them play altos.
Yeah.
Stephanie, Louis, like
Yeah.
Anyway,
And I also saw that lately or recently you posted kind of for the first time all of the artists playing Beansprout, including Danielle Eat the Sandwich and everybody. I thought that was a pretty cool bit of PR because I hadn't seen you guys do that, and I thought that was pretty
yeah.
cool.
We kind of didn't do that for years.
We've always had that tab on our website of Beansprout Artists, but Aaron's usually run the website, and then just over the last year or so, or less than a year, I've started to kind of take over and maybe think of things that he either didn't think of before or just purely didn't have any time to do it. So I'm like, oh, we've got all these great artists. Let's showcase them and tell people about them.
But there's also good reason philosophically why I didn't lean on the artists when we got started. And that was on purpose as a contrast to Mya-Moe. So at Mya-Moe, a lot of people knew about us because Gordon and Char worked their butts off to get famous people to play our instruments. So like that was a huge deal at Mya-Moe. Like the list of famous people on the Mya-Moe page is bananas. And that was a really fun part of that time in our life, like building for all these fancy people. And I just felt like when we restarted Beansprout, I just wanted to like take that huge world, but suck back in and just focus on us and this and just getting the instruments and instruments for normal people, so to speak. And so it meant that I haven't done a lot of marketing about our artists because we do have lots of fancy people who play Beansprouts, and I just haven't done the marketing on it. Because it was kind of a contrast to Mya-Moe, like not good or bad, just this was different, Probably kind of speaks to more of the like blue collar handmade folk art kind of vibe we have of, it's not fancy.
Yeah.
We don't do fancy stuff.
Yeah. We're not perfect and we're not fancy.
I've got a buddy who's like giant Dave Matthews Band fan. Like he has gone to like 60 concerts over the years. So if he had any idea, I was talking to the people that are, making some ukuleles for Dave Matthews, he would lose his mind. So
Yeah.
when I get a chance to see him, I'll have to tell him that because that's kind of a neat side little thing too that maybe people don't know is that you've actually made how many, 2 or 3 for him already?
He has 4.
4.
Yeah. And that actually just happened like during COVID. Those orders came in because they started touring, and then he wrote a new song that needed ukulele again. So through weird connections, they asked me to make them, and then he's had that song in the set since 2020, like all the time. So the instruments get played every night, and that's pretty cool.
You remember what song that is?
Yeah, it's called Sweet. It's like your friend totally knows it. Like every night he just plays the ukulele, starts out, and then the band comes in, and it's it's on YouTube and everything. Oh yeah.
And then he had to make it.
Well, the first I'd sent 2 to begin with.
Okay.
Right? So like the way that people like Dave Matthews work is they don't have one of anything, because if a string breaks or a tuner is wrong, like they have 2 of everything, right? So they ordered 2, and I made a matching set and I mailed them. And then this is the kind of life you have when you build for people like this. They love the instruments. Dave loved them. The sound guys loved them. The techs loved them. Everybody loved them. The guy who didn't love them was the lighting designer, because I used Porterford cedar for the top, which is like it's this wood here for the top. It's light colored, and under the fancy lights, it just blows out into a reflective white, and it like the lighting designer hated it. So they're like, okay, we love the instruments, but we need you to make some that have tops that are stained. And I was like, what color? And they're like, we don't care. It can't be this. And so I made 2 more I took those Porterford cedar tops and stained them. And I was like, I don't know, the stain looks kind of rustic. I'm not so sure. And they're like, nope, we love it. Great. And so like the ones that get played on stage, the tops are stained. And then the 2 white one's in the bus and one's at his house. So yeah, that's how it worked out. But that's the business of working for people like that. Like the lighting designer needed it different. So we did it different.
Now you've got one model that's on tour, don't you? Like not with him, but I mean, just
Oh,
it's one that you created to send out. Where is that one at? I haven't seen
it's
any updates lately.
yeah, it's the instrument's called the Wayfinder, and it's with Craig and Sarah in Honolulu right now, and it's been there for 6 months. I think
Yeah,
they've had it a
they
while,
have lots
but
of other projects going on.
they've been using it a ton and shooting all these things with other artists and other friends of theirs. But they're just like so busy, and Craig is making so much awesome photo and video content that like there's a ton of it that he's got on a hard drive and we haven't seen it. So yeah, the Wayfinder was created just as a long-term project to just mail the instrument all over to different people and let them have it for a while and do what they want with it and add to its mana and then pass it on to the next person. And that's now that project is, when did we start that? That's before COVID, right? It's probably 2019.
About 4 years.
4 years on that project.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's been quite a bit around the States. I think our idea when we get it back from Craig and Sarah is to take it with us to England next year and then start it off on England and Europe for a while. And then it'll probably end up going back to Hawaii again too someday. I don't know what it's gonna. It's just go forever. Like
Yeah.
I have no plans to stop it traveling around. So it's like it's in its own case with a guest book, like a passport book in it, and then it's built into a wooden crate that you screw back together and then ship to the next person. So like it's, you know, ready to keep going forever, I guess.
Now, I did want to ask you, there's two more things I want to ask about. I want to ask about Tonewoods and I want to ask about your, and obviously you don't have to go into depth about it, but the Kingdom era project that you're working on.
Right.
In terms of Tonewood, this is my one Mya-Moe that I've managed to acquire. I am a teacher, so I do not have a ton of money. So this one showed up for $600 and
What?
I made it happen because I thought that was a pretty good buy.
Can you hold that?
Yeah.
Hold the myrtle up here. Okay, so that board of dark green myrtle is the same board of myrtle that all my Mya-Moes are made out of.
Really?
We have matching instruments. So I still have my super soprano and my baritone that's the same dark green, and that's the same dark green myrtle that Eddie Vedder's uke is made of.
Really?
It's the same board. Yeah.
And my only thing, well, there's two things that I don't like about it. First is I wish they wouldn't have put the person's name in the sound hole.
Right.
Because I bought it legally and fair from the people that didn't want it anymore. So forever I have to look at that person's name in there, which is it's bad. But the other thing is the myrtle is it's bright and clear, but it's not really a warm sound. Is that typical of myrtle?
It can be. It's on the brighter side, but I think over the years I've been able to get some more richness out of the myrtle. I mean, Nicole's tenor is all myrtle. Do you think yours is bright and clear but not very rich? I don't know.
I don't really think about it.
You don't really think about it. You just play it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, myrtle definitely is on the bright part of the spectrum, but I find it pretty balanced in general. But maybe it's got something to do with that particular instrument and how it got carved that day, and maybe because it's a concert not a tenor, and I don't know. I'd have to get it in my hands.
It's kind of interesting because I've learned to have attitudes towards cedar or spruce. Spruce tends to be too bright for me, so the cedar would probably be, if I was ever going to order an ukulele of my own, I would go towards a cedar of some kind, likely.
Right. Yeah.
Koa's great too, but cedar, I like cedar.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure what the differences are in the cedars either. If you hear like red cedar versus your Port Oxford or whatever, I don't know if you hear those differences.
Yeah,
I mean,
I do, but I think also it's like when you're working with a builder, like if there's this entire spectrum of sound that exists in the world, and then there's the spectrum of sound that's assigned to ukulele, and then there's the spectrum of sound that like the builder builds within that, so let's say it that much. And then like the different woods you use are only going to make that much of a difference, right? Like my bean sprouts that I make now sound a certain way, and whether we use spruce or cedar or redwood or whatever, they all are similar, but it's just a sprinkling of flavoring with the different tone woods, I think. And the biggest probably difference is, like the Myrtle one or an Alto or all mahogany instrument, it has that traditional sound of all one wood, top, back, and sides. That's like the old way to build an ukulele. That's a very kind of like mid-range strummy sound. But if somebody wants more of everything, I think you do have to have a softwood top with a hardwood back and sides. So that could be a spruce or cedar or redwood top or whatever. And then, but we use the word cedar to mean lots of different things, and almost none of them are like true forestry cedars. So sorry, forestry nerds, but so like Western red cedar, Alaskan yellow cedar, Port Orford cedar, juniper, cypress. They're all these things are of a family, but they're not actually technically cedars. Sometimes they're actually cypresses. Anyway, of those, yeah, Western red cedar I think has a darker and richer tone. Porterford cedar is a little punchier, but it's not as bright as spruce. Um, Rule of thumb, you know, Nicole's like wood. You like when you like one.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can hear the difference.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think about it as much as you do, obviously.
Yeah.
I want to mention that's every ukulele you build. And how often do people tell you what they want, and how often do they just say, make something that looks good and sounds great?
Over the years, more and more people leave more things up to me, which I appreciate. But I think it goes best when I hear from somebody who has like a tone or a style of music they play or one piece of input, and then they're like, "Can you just craft around that?" So like, if you're like, "Oh, I play chord melodies in fingerstyle, and I really want a dark, rich sound," and "Oh, I love how walnut looks," like, and then leaving the rest up to me, I think is the best scenario. Because then while I'm building, sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, he likes whatever, like having that in my brain. I think there's some magic to that, like building it for what somebody wants, and some of that comes through in the hands.
I think it's rare that someone just says, "Build whatever you want for me," though. I mean,
Yeah, usually
that
there's
doesn't really happen.
no, there's a starting point at least, like
And they usually like to pick like what the wood looks like
yeah,
for
or people are like,
or approve.
I
of what
love
you
Myrtle, and I want a baritone, and I use this tuning, and I mainly just strum.
Yeah.
That's like the kind of input I get a lot. So
Do you get a lot of weird tuning requests, or pretty much standard?
we get a few. I think I've fit a niche where, because I'm a player and I play a lot of different styles of music, and I've um, experienced lots of different instruments, that when somebody comes to me with like what sounds like a strange tuning request or a weird stringing request, it doesn't seem that strange to me. So I'm like, oh yeah, I can make that work. We just got to move this gauge over here and switch over to that, and then I'll brace it this way, and then we're good to go. Um, so I think I've kind of become known as somebody who's not super scared about that stuff. So we get a fair amount of people who, when we fill out the note card for Nicole to do the final check, I have to write on there like, oh, this one is this. Don't forget it's tuned like that, because we do have mandolin players who are playing uke and they want a mandolin tuning, or banjo people always have their own weird tunings, and yeah.
Now, you also do some kind of fun projects on the side that's all related to you. You have this fascination with ukuleles of the past and instruments of the past. So you've been like, I don't know if people are sending to you or you're buying them, some vintage ukuleles and then repairing them, then
Yeah.
offering them on eBay after they're repaired. But I think you're studying them as you repair them, if I'm not mistaken, to see how they're built. And then that's leading to this giant project that you had as a grant to go to Hawaii and study Kingdom era ukuleles. I had the chance for my 50th birthday to go with my wife to Honolulu in March. We spent a total of 3 days there. It was a Costco special, flight package. So again, not super wealthy, 50 years old, celebrating out there. And I had the chance to visit both Kamaka and Koaloha while I was there. Not like, and I was hoping to visit Sean and see his collection, which you actually had a chance to do, but that didn't work out, which is okay. And then Craig Chi was busy with he had his ukulele getaway or whatever they call that. We've got another one coming up. So he was there doing that. So I couldn't even visit Craig Chi, who I've met. And he wouldn't remember me either. But if I was going to have anybody teach me, he'd probably be the person I'd call right away. Either him or Matt Dahlberg, either one of those two guys I would call right away, just because I really clicked with their teaching. But do you want to talk about, I mean, obviously the Kingdom era project is a series of YouTube videos that you've already made. So anybody really interested in that, but where are you at with that? And then what's the next step, which is coming up?
Well, the foundation of that is part of my own woodworking education. Is I've gone back and I've been studying how to use traditional hand tools, because like as we said before, when I started Beansprout, I didn't even own a chisel. So I wanted to learn about, you know, hand tool woodworking of the past. And in the 19th century in America and England, for instance, the average homeowner and general person was a handier, craftier person, and they had a set of hand tools that did the certain kinds of work around their house and whatever. So I've gone back and relearned how about all the different kinds of saws and planes and chisels and gouges and all that stuff. And as that went, I've just been in my free time, I'm just reading books and everything all the time about that. And I started reading this magazine called Mortise and Tenon Magazine, and it is like a really fancy journal style magazine of really high quality about hand tool woodworking. And they put out a call for research, and they wanted to find new writers and researchers to do a project about hand tool woodworking and how whatever they wanted. So I wrote up a grant proposal that I would go to Hawaii and study some original instruments from the 1880s and 90s, study what materials, tools, and techniques made them, and then come back to my shop and make some instruments in that style. And the goal of that was to kind of follow in the footsteps of the people who made them with the kind of tools they used and do it the same way here.
I
And
think you thought your grant would be picked, did you?
not at all, no. But I don't know, like in hindsight, now that I think about the people who from Morris and Tenon magazine, like I have a master's degree in music education. I've written for other publications. I use hand tools every day. Like they probably saw us as like, oh yeah, he's a writer already. Like I probably checked a few boxes. I just didn't think they would care about ukuleles, because usually this magazine is about furniture and blacksmithing and basket making and just all kinds of other hand woodworking stuff. Anyway, I got the grant, and so I went to Hawaii, and I went to the Bishop Museum and studied the instruments in their archives from that time period. And then I went to Sean at Ukulele Friend, and I studied his collection of original instruments from the 1880s and 90s. In general, they were built by these three guys from Madeira. So Madeira was a Portuguese island in the Atlantic, and a lot of people came from Madeira to Hawaii in the 1880s to be farm workers. These guys were professional cabinet makers and luthiers, and they came to Hawaii to do farm work, and then they eventually started building again. Anyway, those three gentlemen, their instruments still exist in small numbers, and Sean has those instruments, some of those instruments. So I studied that stuff, and then I came back here, and I built. I'm now on my third instrument built in that style. Where I'm at with that project is now I got invited to go back to the Ukulele Guild of Hawaii meeting in November, and I'm going to speak up on this project there and bring my instruments to present back to these people in Hawaii. And while I'm there, I have more research lined up while I'm there. So, and it's become just like a through line in my regular building where I'm studying these older instruments, and they're starting to kind of come out in my own in my own actual work too. So this one is of the two instruments that came from Madeira. They had two. One was called the machette, one was called the rajau. This one was called the machette. It's the little one. It looks like a soprano ukulele to you. In Portugal and Madeira, they called this a machette usually. And then the second instrument they made in the style, which no one has seen now, but you guys on the podcast, is called a rajau. It's bigger. It's got 5 strings, and it's the size of a tenor ukulele. So in the historic photographs, you'll sometimes see someone with a bigger instrument like this. And the Portuguese name was rajau, and one of the names that they were called in Hawaii was a taro patch fiddle. So in the 1880s and 90s, there were still 2 different things that they were playing, and then over the years, this one kind of went away, and what we think of as a soprano ukulele became the most popular body size. But the stringing and tuning from 4 of these strings was adopted on this. That's probably too much information.
No, it's not. I mean, it's exactly where I know I'm at. Now, both those have metal strings too, right?
Well, some of the Portuguese instruments of this style do have metal strings, but the ones that were built by the original people in the 1880s and 90s in Hawaii, they're all gut strings.
Okay.
But as part of the Portuguese diaspora, as these instruments went other places in the world, steel strings did happen. Steel strings were more common, and I've seen there's modern people in Madeira and Portugal building instruments like these with steel strings, but examining the original instruments in unrestored condition, that's gut strings. So I'm sticking with that.
No, when I was at the Kamaka factory, Fred Kamaka Jr. indicated that was it his grandfather
Mhm.
was the one who took the standard ukulele and made it deeper and potentially even wider with a wider waist. Is that Kamaka embellishing itself, or do you think that's actually kind of what happened? 'Cause
Well, so Kamaka, I believe, starts in 1917. So at that time, there were a bunch of other ukulele factories and builders. The people I've been studying, it's more like 1886 to 1895 to 1900 that I'm really kind of interested in at the moment. Um, so there was no factories at that time. These are people one-off building things. But yes, when it comes into factory time, the little soprano size one, or like one just like this actually. Here's a Hawaiian instrument from like 1910. So that's like the little soprano. You can see it's got a very skinny waist and it is very slim and thin. And so yeah, the Kamaka factory, he stretched this out and made it deeper to get more tone. So their model, which they call standard, I think, right, is what we think of as a soprano. And yeah, that's the story I've heard too. And when I look at other ones from the 1910s, early teens, this size and style or waist size is more common. So I think the Kamaka story could be right on the money about that.
So the big question, and by the way, I had a chance to when I was there, I even went to the gravesite of Diaz.
Oh,
And
cool.
yeah, because it's there. It's a little hard to find, but if you look at the Find a Grave website, you can find it, and you can find it in, you can actually go and visit his. I don't know if you can find the other two gentlemen's grave sites, or
I don't
not.
know.
So I have an interest. This is a topic of interest of mine, which is why I asked. But so what if the smaller traditional original ukuleles weren't didn't have I get the sense that they didn't have a lot of sustain,
Mhm.
and it was kind of not as a full tone. What part of that can find its way back into your own building of value?
Oh,
Or is it
yeah.
just understanding the master, I guess is the question, other than the
Yeah.
headstock shape, which is pretty cool.
Well, here's the main thing. When somebody says to me, I've got an old ukulele, you should look at this. Sometimes it's like a 1950s Kamaka. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's from the 50s. So that's really cool. Thanks for showing me. But like, that's not old to me. But then when somebody says, I've got an old ukulele and they show me a 1920 Kamaka or a 1918 Kumale or a 1915 Diaz, Nunej, at that time, the instruments sold in Hawaii were all koa. They had no fretboards. And you're right, it had a very bright and light sound without much sustain and richness. Okay. So, like that one I was just holding up, all koa, it doesn't have an applied fretboard. It's just frets sunk into the neck. And they were in the teens, in the early 1910s, those instruments were sold by the thousands to tourists. So they were made quickly and cheaply, and it is just like a kind of a ricky ticky kind of sound. Okay, but the instruments that came from Portugal to Hawaii were earlier, 1880s and 90s, were very different. They had a much higher build quality because they're built by professionally trained European luthiers who are not cranking out hundreds at a time for tourists. They're making fine instruments. They had a softwood top and a hardwood back and sides. They have a applied fretboard. They have properly fit tuning pegs. They have good string action, and they have a better sound. So the 1880s and 90s instruments were really high level handmade instruments. And then they needed to start cranking them out for tourists, and they opened factories and things kind of went a certain way. And then through the hard work of people like the Kamakas through the 20s, 30s, and 40s, the instruments came back up in quality. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yep,
So,
yep.
even to our friends in Hawaii, when they encounter the ones in Sean's collection that are the really old ones, they're blown away because the instruments play and sound so good compared to the cheap factory ones of the teens.
No, makes total sense.
So yeah, but the thing is, like Diaz, there's only 12 surviving instruments. And I've seen 7 of them.
Oh.
And Sean has a few that are playable. So it's hard to make this argument to anyone because how could they go touch and play one of the as instruments. Like no one will get to do that.
So are you seeing anything in the build that you can then incorporate into your own building and your own style and aesthetic?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a few things I've been doing. I've been interested in the marquetry and decoration of them, and I've been learning how to do that myself. I also just think that the curves and the shapes are so different that as I work on the Kingdom Era ones and then I go look at my own instruments, my brain kind of can't even look at mine anymore. Like I get so worked into, because you just like take it for granted, you know. So a great example is our normal tenor has this shape. You know, this is normally what we do. This is what I've made several hundred of. And then the Rajao, you know, the Kingdom Era tenor, it's just different. The way the curves look and the way that the angles intersect, and it's just different. And so it's been kind of fun to imagine these curves and ideas in what I do a little bit more.
Nicole, I don't want to leave you out of the discussion. I felt like we waxed you up. Do you get to go and do all the fun stuff in Hawaii too, or do you at some point just go? You go play at the ukuleles in your building. I'm gonna go, I don't know, visit, you know, whatever, Waikiki Beach and just go or whatever. Or I'll take Henry and we'll go do this. Or what do you end up doing during that process?
We did a little of that, kind of doing our own thing where there was the day where Aaron was with Sean at Ukulele Friend, and we were like, okay, he's just gonna be gone the entire day. So we just what did we do? That it was Valentine's Day, and Henry really wanted to go to the mall. That was connected to the
I've never been to a
thing.
mall.
Yeah.
Henry never been to a mall. So the best thing to Henry about Hawaii was the mall. Like,
yeah.
So
yeah. So
I mean, we went swimming every day. We went to the beach every day.
Yeah.
We went somewhere cool to eat every day.
Yeah.
You know, we saw jungles and ate good food and shaved ice every day. And hiking.
Yeah.
And, you know.
Yeah, but when Aaron's going back by himself in November, just because Henry will be in school again, and it's just a little bit easier. But we, of course, would love to go back as a family too. Yeah.
Well, if you guys ever make it out to this Minnesota area, we'll have to go to the Mall of America and take Henry there.
Yeah, there you go.
That's worth the visit, and it'll be our treat for dinner or something. You let us know if you ever make it out here. And I thank you for your time today. I know we went way over what you intended, but with all sincerity, just it's fascinating. Your lives are fascinating to me. I wish you the best. And I thank you for all that you do, not only building instruments, but all the educational resources, the teaching that you do, all the YouTube stuff that you've done and continue to do for both of you. It really brings a different side to this world of ukulele. And I just appreciate you spending the time with us today.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's good for us to sit and reflect on these things too a little bit and talk about it, because normally there is zero reflection because we are just
trying to get the next thing done.
And keep living this weird life. Unfortunately, as working class people, to live these weird lives, you got to keep doing it. You get back out there and make another thing. So
yeah.
The last thing I should probably ask, just for clarification again, is where can people find all of your resources and things like that?
Yeah, so on our website for music and books and everything is quietamericanmusic.com. That's our band, The Quiet American. And so you can get all the books and CDs there, and digital versions of the books. And then our musical instruments is called Beansprout. So that's thebeansprout.com. And on there, we also have the books and CDs too, in case somebody wants that. But on that site, besides the instruments, we've got strings and straps and humidifiers and
case tags,
swag. We will sell you stuff for sure. So,
all right. Thank you again for your time. Appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And as always, we'll be back again soon with some more Uke stuff for you.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, Chris. We appreciate it.